So thank you for being here, and thank you, Alain, for being here with us today. So Alain Ponton from Université Paris-Cité, he's going to be our host today. We're going to host him today, and he's going to give us a class about the real physics of composite materials. So thank you for accepting to be here with us today and to talk about these materials. And so please, you can go ahead and start sharing your presentation, and we're ready to go here.
Thank you.
Great, perfect. And I guess that if people have questions, can raise a hand in Zoom or write in the chat, or just make yourself visible and stop Alain to ask questions. Okay, ready to go.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to thank Leah and Michel to invite me today and to have the opportunity to give this talk on Rheophysics on complex materials. I will do this by first giving some kind of introduction on complex materials. Then I will show that we can manage to study the polymer network at a different scale, and I will explain how why it is important to investigate the property at a different scale. And then I will show you two kinds of complex materials. Magnetic sensitive composite materials, and if we have time, composites for selective absorption. So first, what is called complex materials? So very often, complex materials are issue of soft matter at the interfaces between physics, chemistry, engineering, and biology. And here you have some example of material issue from soft matter, colloids, polymers, gel and glasses, surfactant, liquid crystal, and biological macromolecules. We will see some common features on these materials, which have many applications in different industry. And here you have some example of sectors in which these materials are used. So first, colloids. So as you probably know, colloids are structural units which the size lower than a few 10 microns, dispersed in continuous space. And these structural units are subjective to thermal agitation. And this thermal agitation, in general, is sufficient to maintain a dispersed media. And here you have some example of colloid and application of colloid in a current life. The second example of material from soft matter is polymer. So you can have a linear chain. You can have a branch chain with a main chain and ramification. You can have also a specific polymer as non-rimers. You can have chain graft on the surface. And you can have also some polymer with electrical charges, which are called polyelectrolytes. And we will see in the next few slides that by changing the pH, you can modulate the property of this kind of polymers. You can have also liquid crystals. and depending on the orientation of liquid crystals in a cube, or if liquid crystals are arranged in a plate, or also in plate with different direction, you can have different kind of liquid crystals with different property. And here, very often, these liquid crystals are birefringent. And here you can observe some pictures of this liquid crystal showing the birefringent properties. Surfactants. So surfactants are molecules with hydrophilic head and hydrophobic tail. This, depending on concentration and temperature, this molecule can form micelles. And the shape of micelles depend on many different conditions, physical, chemical condition, and arrangement of these surfactant molecules. So you can have spherical micelles, cylindrical micelles, hexagonal packing of these surfactant molecules. You can form a laminar phase, and this different shape could be deduced from the ratio between the volume of the hydrophobic part and hydrophilic part. You can also have material from soft matter, typically biological systems, or typically ADN or ATP, which is very complex due to organization such as surfactant. But in this case, you can have also biological aspects such as metabolism, growth, response to stimuli, and reproduction. So, in conclusion, with these few examples, material issued from some soft matter are characterized by a very large length scale. So typically, you have here the length scale in nanometer from atomic structure to macroscopic structure. So typically, here you have the length involved in material issue of soft matter, and in this case, atomic length can be ignored. These materials are also characterized by a very large time and energy scale. So this induce a slow dynamics in non-equilibrium condition. And this is very important to investigate the property and also to analyze the property of these materials. For interactions, so in general, the main interaction in the soft of materials issue of soft matter are low energy interaction, such as ionic interactions, van der Waals interaction, and hydrogen bonds. So, to summarize, three main features of soft matter material: a very large length scale, very tight length scale, weak interaction, and the possibility to organize themselves in self-assembly structure. And this self-assembly structure result from a competition between interaction energy and entropy. So, materials issued from soft matter are complex and disordered structure, hierarchical structure, and self-assembly. It means structure at different scale, and the property result from a coupling between slow and fast dynamics. From this material, you can have material which can respond to variation of external fields. So I will show you some examples. First, so the external condition could be physical in origin, typically gravity, if you have sedimentation, electrical or magnetic field, UV or visible light, pressure or temperature, or can be biochemical in origin, such as pH, unique strength, antigen, or enzyme for biological molecules. So you can modulate the property of this material by changing these parameters. So I will show you some example for simple smart materials. And you can control in this way the shape in response to an applied field, and you can induce, as we will see in the next slide, you can induce bending motion or volume change in 3 dimensions. So typically, when you have a polyelectrolyte with electrical charge, for example, here we have a negatively charged polyelectrolyte. Of course, you have a counter ion for equilibrium of electrical charge. So depending on the number of negative charge and also the concentration of counter ion, you can change the conformation of the polymer chain by changing the pH or the concentration of ion in solution, which is the unique length. Another example of pH-sensitive materials, this is this kind of polymer, which is called ketosane. Ketosane is obtained by deacetylation of ketene, and mainly ketene is extracted from insect and shrimp shells. And here you can see that ketosane bear amine function. So in a specific condition of pH and temperature, you can have a protonation of this function. So ketosane is a positively charged polyelectrolyte. And you can form a gel, an irreversible gel. And you can see here this ketosane solution. Alors, this ketosane solution is colored with a dye for visualization, but normally ketosane gel, hydrogel, is transparent. And in this case, you have an irreversible cross-linking. And this kind of hydrogel have some very interesting property. As you can see on this slide, you can induce deswelling or swelling of gel by just changing the pH. So you can use these smart materials for example, drug delivery materials. Alors, in case of a polymer, you have a covalent bond, or you have also the polymer chain, which are cross-linked by non-covalent bonds, by low energy interaction, such as the hydrogen bond or dipolar interaction. In general, when you formulate a gel with covalent bond, you have rigid materials. And in case of polymer gel formed by irreversible bonds, you have a soft gel. And one question is, can we have both in the same polymer, covalent bond and non-covalent bond? And the answer is yes, due to dynamic covalent chemistry. And I will show one example. So by modification of a polymer, here you have two kinds of monomers in these polymers, to simplify, the blue one and red one. And in this case, you can have both covalent bond and non-covalent bond. And the main conclusion is that you can induce reversible transition between a fluid state and a gel state. And I will show a picture here. Just by changing the pH, so in acid condition, you have a fluid, and when you increase the pH, you have an hydrogen just by changing the pH. You can also have some materials sensitive to light, UV light and visible light. And in this case, you have photosensible polymers. And you can also use these smart materials for very interesting property. So I will show you some example. Here you have a polymer. It is a thermosensitive polymer in which you have introduced a photochrome. And by here we have example of the polymer in dark exposition, UV exposition, and light radiation. So you can see a change of color, so change of structure. And here you have also these three examples. And you can see that you have a formation of colloidal crystalline domain just by changing the light irradiation. And here it is also another example of, in this case, temperature-sensitive materials. So here you have a thermosensitive polymer, and on the surface of this first thermosensitive polymer, you place a second polymer, which is also thermosensitive. And you can see here on the first image at room temperature, the second one is transparent. The second deposit gel is transparent. And when you increase the temperature, you can see here the formation of the Texas appear. It is, sorry, it is mistake, it Texas appear. And you can induce the formation of some colloidal structure. And it is totally reversible. Another example of temperature-sensitive materials, you can induce a shape transition just by changing the temperature, and also you can have also a shape memory effect. So we have seen that we can have smart materials for which, simple smart materials for which you can modulate the property just by changing pH, temperature, or light irradiation. And we can also have some more complex materials in which you have a polymer matrix in which you introduce some fillers. So these fillers could be nanotube, could be nano or microparticles, could be fibers. And you can have different composite materials depending on the interactions between fillers and polymer matrix. So the first case, which is called just bending, you disperse the fillers in the polymer matrix, which is cross-linked. You can have the situation in which the polymer matrix is cross-linked and you disperse the polymer matrix in the wool after some treatment, or the fillers can act as cross-linker of the polymer matrix. Some example issue from the literature, and then I will show you some result of research developed in the laboratory. So here you have two kinds of polymer. One contain carbon black. The second one contain a dye. You cut the two gel and you put together one part of this gel and one part of this gel, and you can obtain the two parts put together, and you have a gel. You can press the gel, you can contract the gel, so you have what is called self-assembly materials. This kind of composite could be used to act as a sensor, or typically it is used for the detection of glucose. So here you have a thermosensitive material, and depending on the temperature, you can have a swelling or a deswelling of this microgel. So in case of deswelling, glucose can diffuse, and in case of swelling, glucose is trapped inside microgel. And you can use this property to elaborate the sensor for glucose depending on the temperature. Here you can see the difference of color, meaning that in case you have no glucose and in other case you have glucose. And the change of color is induced by the formation of colloidal crystal which diffract light. Another example of composite materials. So in this case, you have a polymer matrix, and you introduce in this polymer matrix some electrical nanoparticles, so typically titanium oxide. And with this kind of experiment, if you apply an homogeneous static electric field, you can induce the bending of this composite. And in case of non-homogeneous magnetic field, you can also observe a bending of the polymer. So with this example, you can see that you can modulate the property of a composite by changing, by applying a magnetic field, electrical field. So we have just seen that in case of composite, you have a polymer matrix in which you introduce fillers. And we have seen that these materials are characterized by different scale, different energy. So the first question is how to investigate the property of just polymer matrix at different scale. So to answer this question, macro rheology is not sufficient, because typically macro rheology, the frequency range is between 10⁻³ and 100 maximum. So if you want to extend the frequency range of investigation of viscoelastic property, it is mandatory to combine macrobiology with other experimental investigation. So typically microbiology, diffusive wave spectroscopy, and I will show you also, if you want to extend at higher frequency, Brillouin spectroscopy. So this is one example. In case of sodium alginate aqueous solution, so polymer matrix are not cross-linked. In this case, you have just polymer solution. Now, depending on the concentration, if you perform shear flow measurement, you observe, depending on the concentration, at very low frequency, it is Newtonian. The viscosity is constant as function of shear rate at a constant temperature. And when you increase the viscosity, the polymer solution are non-Newtonian. So it's very classical. You can fit this shear flow measurement with this classical model, in which you deduce the low shear viscosity corresponding to the viscosity of the structured polymer, and the shear thinning behavior can be explained by the disentanglement and polymer chain. So if you plot the viscosity as function of concentration, classically, you can observe different power law frequency power law dependence of viscosity with different exponents corresponding to here polyelectrolyte behavior, and at high concentration due to the condensation of counter ions, electrostatic repulsion are screened, and here it is typically the behavior of a neutral polymer. And from the concentration dependence of viscosity in diluted regime, you can deduce the molecular weight. Now, just a few words about microbiology. So microbiology is based on diffusing wave spectroscopy. So typically, the sample is illuminated by a laser, and the scattered light is measured and analyzed to obtain the intensity autocorrelation function. So in case of just polymer, you introduce a few quantity of spherical microparticles which act as a diffuser. And the concentration is sufficiently low not modify, of course, the rheological property of polymer solution. Alors, without briefly, from the intensity autocorrelation function, you can calculate the mean square displacement of microparticles, and the diffusion in this case is only due to thermal agitation, Brownian motion. So in this case, you can perform measurement only for in this case, diluted sample or semi-diluted sample. And from the mean square displacement, you can obtain the shear viscoelastic moduli as a function of frequency. And by Fourier transform, you deduce the elastic moduli and viscous moduli as for macro-rheology, but here the experimental method is different. Alors here you can see the correlation between macro-rheology and micro-rheology. So here you have the elasticity as function of frequency. This point corresponds to macro-rheology. This point corresponds to diffuse wave spectroscopy micro-rheology. And you can see that the main advantage is to extend the frequency range of the determination of viscoelastic property. And here, if you plot the real part of complex moduli as function of frequency, you have also a good continuity between macro-rheology and micro-rheology, and you can also fit this kind of curve with the cross model used for flow measurement, but in this case in a frequency domain. And the main advantage first is to extend the frequency range in which you can determine the viscoelastic property of polymer, and you can also determine what is called the polymer persistent length. So if you plot the shear viscoelastic moduli as function of frequency, you can observe two kinds of regime. So at low frequency, this in polymer chemistry, it is called the Thiem-Roth mode with this power law. And at high frequency, you have the bending mode. And the change of these two modes occur for a critical frequency. And from the critical frequency, you can deduce the persistent length. And if you perform measurement at different concentration of polymer, you have the evolution of the persistent length as function of frequency. And there is some theoretical model to deduce the persistent length with an electrostatic part and intrinsic part. So this part, of course, is due to the charge of a polyelectrolyte. And now, Rheology spectroscopy, if you want to investigate the viscoelastic property around gigahertz. So just a few words about Rheology spectroscopy. So the experimental setup, you have a laser, the sample. It is an interferometric experimental method. So you measure the backscattering light recorded in a stock and anti-stock region with a positive and negative shift. And what is very important, you irradiate the excitation is in the light domain. You probe the fluctuation of index of refraction of the materials, and you measure acoustic wave. So typically, you obtain this kind of result, a peak intensity as function of frequency, from the frequency of the maximum. You can deduce the longitudinal velocity of acoustic wave. And from this velocity, you can deduce this constant of elasticity. And from the full width at half maximum dissipation, you can deduce longitudinal viscosity. So here you have some example for two concentration of sodium alginate. And here you obtain very low frequency because here the value is in millipascal second. If we compare to the low shear viscosity measured by macro rheology, the value was for this concentration, I don't remember, but it's more than a few 10 of Pascal. And it's normal because with Rheology spectroscopy, you deduce the viscoelastic property at gigahertz. So very small scales, typically the micron scales. So you probe the property of at very low scale. And if you want to also to obtain some direct information of the structure of a material, typically you perform diffusion measurement. So at this scale, the most efficient experimental technique is a small angle X-ray scattering. So typically you have the sample, you will radiate, and you record the intensity of the sample. So let me to show you some example and what kind of information you can extract. So typically here you have the intensity normalized by concentration as function of the wave factor. And so if you want to get some qualitative information here at this range of Q, all the curve collapse. So you have a power law, and from this power law, you can deduce a fractal dimension. You have some theoretical model to predict the value of fractal dimension. And typically, this value is between random call conformation and rod-like chain. So you can deduce some information about the conformation of polymer chain. You can analyze more deeply this kind of experimental data. And in this case, if you analyze all the data, you can deduce the correlation length of the polymer chain. So with small angle scattering, you can deduce the correlation length, and with micro rheology, you can deduce the persistent length. So, in conclusion of this part, by combining different experimental methods, macro rheology, micro rheology, Rheology spectroscopy, and small angle scattering, you can obtain information on, in this case, polymer solution from molecular scale to macroscopic scale. Now, I will move to the first example of composite materials, and in particular, magnetic sensitive materials. So we know how to characterize, to investigate the polymer matrix. Now we introduce fillers to obtain composite materials. So the first example is composite materials. So in this case, you have a polymer matrix in which you introduce magnetic nanoparticles. So the polymer matrix could be just a solution or could be a gel. And I will show you some results in both cases. So the first example for the polymer, we have chosen sodium alginate. So in this case, sodium alginate is negatively charged polymer due to this functional group, carboxylate. Depending on the pH, the carboxylate function could be deprotonated, and sodium alginate is a negatively charged polyelectrolyte. And in this case, it is very interesting because if you add positive ions such as calcium, you can induce cross-linking of sodium alginate chain and to obtain a gel, which is not covalent bond. For magnetic nanoparticles, so for magnetic nanoparticles, we have synthesized this kind of particles. So these nanoparticles are maghemite, and these maghemite are negatively charged. And at the end of the first step of synthesis, the point of zero charge for which flocculation occurs is about 7. So it is a problem because we want to introduce these magnetic nanoparticles in aqueous polymer solution. And the pH of the polymer solution is around 7. So we have modified the surface of these magnetic nanoparticles by complexation with citrate ion. And in this case, the point of zero charge occurs at about 5. So at 7, citrated magnetic nanoparticles are stable. So we can introduce in a polymer matrix. So here we have first established a phase diagram. You have here the concentration of polymer as a function of volumic fraction of magnetic nanoparticles. So for all black points, you obtain macroscopically homogeneous solution. And for all yellow points, we obtain a macroscopically inhomogeneous solution. But in both cases, you can observe here droplet of demixture. And this is very important. So even if the sample is macroscopically homogeneous, you observe microscopically formation of spherical droplet of demixture. We have investigated more deeply these some samples. Typically here you have this result obtained by small angle neutron scattering. So here you have the structure factor as the wavelength. For the lowest concentration of polymer, you can see that the structure factor is rather flat, so you have no interaction. But for the highest concentration of polymer, you can see here a decrease of structure factor, which means some interaction between the particles. But small angle neutron scattering is not so precise in this range, so we perform small angle X-ray scattering. So, and here you can see the result. For the phosphorus concentration, the structure factor is flat. But for the highest concentration of polymer solution, you can observe a maximum, and here, of course, an increase and a maximum. From the position of this maximum, you can deduce a mean distance between the particles, and from this distance, you can deduce the volume fraction of particles inside the droplet. To investigate the viscoelastic property under applied magnetic field, we build up these special tools. So here you have a classical rheometer with here a cone and plate geometry. We build up these two coils, one for to put the plate, and this other one around the cone under rotation. This configuration allows to apply a continuous and homogeneous magnetic field. And we also build up a third part to observe the sample during measurement. So in this case, we replace the plate by a glass plate, and we can perform rheological measurement under applying a continuous and homogeneous magnetic field, and you can observe the structure under shear and under magnetic field. So here, first example of shear rheology. So here you have the viscosity as function of the shear rate for a different value of magnetic field. So at low shear rate, you can observe an increase of viscosity as function of magnetic field. And at a higher frequency, all the curve collapse, so you have no effect of magnetic field. So how we can explain this increase of viscosity as a function of magnetic field? So we can see more deeply this effect by plotting what is called the reduced magnetohydrological parameters. This is the increase of viscosity under magnetic field compared to the viscosity without magnetic field. And for two value of shear rate, you can observe an increase of these parameters. And in the same way, we come back. The critical shear rate between Newtonian region and non-Newtonian region decrease when you increase the magnetic field. And for viscoelastic measurement, you obtain result in Youle agreement. Here we have so by oscillatory measurement, by plotting the elasticity as function of frequency for the different magnetic field, you observe an increase of elasticity. So how can explain this mechanism? As you remember, when we established the phase diagram, even if the samples are macroscopically homogeneous, you can observe the formation of droplets of demixture. And when you apply a magnetic field, you can observe a deformation of spherical droplets under magnetic field. And we will see it is completely irreversible. And with our configuration, the direction of magnetic field is perpendicular to the shear rate. So the droplets are elongated in a direction perpendicular to the shear. And this explains the increase of viscosity and increase of viscoelasticity. And we use digital processing to analyze the deformation of droplets. And we can use some model to explain the deformation of droplets. So without going into detail, just a few words about this model. You have the competition of magnetic energy and surface energy. And by minimization of these two energies are constant volume, and with the hypothesis that the magnetic susceptibility inside the droplet is much higher than the magnetic susceptibility outside the droplet, you can show that the ratio of long axis to short axis is a function of the magnetic field power 2, the initial ratio of the droplet, the magnetic susceptibility, and interferential tension. So by fitting the experimental data, you can deduce the interferential tension, the magnetic susceptibility, and the volume fraction of particles inside the droplet. And here, what is most interesting, here we have we show the interferential tension and the volume fraction inside the droplet as a function of concentration of polymer normalized by the volume fraction of particles from the synthesis. And you can see an increase of interferential tension. And the question is there any alginate inside the droplet? Because the interferential tension increase and is much higher than classical ferrofluids. To answer this question, we study the relaxation. So we switch off magnetic field and we observe a relaxation of droplet coming back to their initial spherical shape. And this relaxation is mono-exponential. So we can deduce this relaxation time from the fitting of deformation of droplet under magnetic field. We have previously determined the interferential tension, so we can deduce from the relaxation time the effective viscosity inside the droplet. And the effective viscosity inside the droplet is much higher than the viscosity of the solution of ferrofluid. So the answer is probably we should have alginate a chain inside the magnetic droplet. No, after the study of this sensitive polymer solution, we investigate nanocomposite hydrogel. So now we induce a cross-linking of polymer chain. And in this case, for sodium alginate, we induce this cross-linking of chain by adding cation. And we obtain, like this, homogeneous hydrogel. And why this X-box structure? Because we have seen that sodium alginate bear negatively the charge. So the calcium have attractive electrostatic interaction with the polymer chain and form this kind of structure, which is called an X-box structure. So to elaborate this nanocomposite hydrogel, we prepare the aqueous solution of sodium alginate, we introduce magnetic nanoparticles, and then we induce the gelation to obtain magnetic sensitive composite. And the question is how to study the formation of this composite as function of time around the solvent transition and the mechanical structure property of totally gel composite. So the first step is how to study the solvent transition as function of the two parameters, the volume fraction of magnetic nanoparticles and the magnetic field. To do this, we use what is called time-resolved mechanical spectroscopy. and first proposed by Winter. So in a few words, in a fluid state, the viscosity is very low, and step by step, you have a cross-linking of polymer chain. So the viscosity increase until a divergence. And at this time, we have a three-dimensional network. So you have an elasticity in the network. So you have an increase of elasticity as function of time. And for some shale, the shear stress reaction modulus is described by a power law as function of time, with the amplitude is the gel stiffness and the exponent is the relaxation exponent between 0 and 1. And the shear stress reaction modulus is associated to a spectrum of relaxation time, which is also described by a power law. Physically, it means that you have no characteristic viscoelastic time in your material, not a discrete spectrum of relaxation time, but you have a continuous relaxation time in your material. Alors, we perform oscillatory measurement. So by Fourier transform, you can obtain the frequency dependence of elastic and loss modulus. And you can see that the ratio of these two moduli is independent of frequency. So if you perform a successive frequency sweep, you measure J prime and J double prime as function of the time, not viscoelastic time, but the time of evolution of the material, and at different frequency. And by plotting the ratio as function of time for the different frequency, you observe a crossover. From the crossover, you can deduce the gelation time, and from the projection on the ordinate axis, you can deduce the gel stiffness and the relaxation exponent. So you can obtain kinetics information and from also some qualitative information on the structure of critical gel. Critical gel is a gel formed at the gelation time. So this is one example. Without magnetic field here, so we plot loss moduli as for, by elastic moduli for the time evolution of the system. For the different frequency, we observe a crossover point. From this crossover, we deduce the gelation time, the gel stiffness, and the relaxation exponent. Alors here, you can see that we have an effect of the volume fraction of magnetic field on the kinetics of gelation. Higher is the volume fraction, higher is the relaxation time. And we can also observe a small increase of the relaxation exponent. It means that we have a softer gel. Why? I have just said that the theoretical value of relaxation exponent is between 0 and 1. When delta is close to 0, you have a rigid gel, and when delta tends to 1, you have a softer gel. And also, the relaxation exponent decrease, softer gel, and a decrease of gel stiffness. And this relaxation exponent could be related to the exponent describing the divergence of viscosity and the divergence of elasticity. And in this case, it is close to a percolation model, 3D percolation model. Alors, now the effect of magnetic field. You can see also the result on critical gel, and in our experimental condition, it seems that the magnetic field has no effect on the sol-gel transition. But we will see that when we investigate the property of totally gel composite, it is not the same. Now, after the investigation of the gel transition, we study the property of totally gel composite after, typically in this case, it is around 20 hours. After 20 hours, we obtain stationary mechanical property of composite. So in this case, we perform oscillatory measurement. And here you see the effect of magnetic field. So when you increase the volume fraction of magnetic field, you obtain a softer gel because they are not solid particles. Keep in mind that we form a droplet of demission. And in good agreement, when you increase the volume fraction of particles, you increase the number of droplets of demission, and you decrease the loss moduli. We also perform uniaxial compression by using the axial device of the rheometer. And also, when you increase the volume fraction of magnetic particles, you decrease the Young modulus deduced from the slope of the stress as function of the strain, which is in a good agreement with oscillatory measurement. We study also the swelling property. And you can see that swelling property in water. So we put hydrogel in water, and we weight the hydrogel before immersion and after immersion at different time, and we define the swelling degree by this equation. And if you plot the swelling degree as function of time, so we can see an increase of swelling and an increase of swelling when you increase the volume fraction of magnetic particles. So, and it is totally in agreement with the viscoelastic property, because we have just seen when we increase the volume fraction of magnetic particles, you obtain softer gel and you increase the swelling property. So, in conclusion, for nanocomposite, with this special device, we can study the viscoelastic property of this sensitive composite as function of time around the surgeon transition by time-resolved mechanical spectroscopy and totally gel hydrogel disc. And we, by Rheology compression, and we can link this mechanical property with a swelling property. And we modulate this property by either the volume fraction of magnetic particles or by applying a continuous magnetic field. And here, this is a brief summary. Here you have a macroscopic rheology, compression measurement, swelling, and we have a correlation between mechanical property and swelling property. Mechanical property Young modulus decrease, the degree of swelling increase. And now I will move to my last part of talk. The second example of composite materials is composite for selective adsorption. So in this case, we elaborate the composite with fillers derived from graphene. Graphene is a two-dimensional crystal of a single layer of carbon atoms. And the first the discovery of this kind of structure is around 2000, and you can obtain different structure depending on the dimension of these crystals. And this graphene shows some very interesting property of electrical conductivity, electronic property, thermostability, mechanical property. They are very used in many applications, but they have in our kind of application main drawback. They show a very poor dispersion in water. So if we want to use them to introduce in polymer matrix, we have to modify this graphene. So the solution is to oxidize the graphene to obtain graphene oxide. And in this case, when you oxidize the graphene, you have here a lot of functional group with oxygen and proton. And if you induce the deprotonation, you obtain graphene oxide, which are negatively charged. And in this case, you obtain graphene oxide, which can be dispersed in water or organic solvent with a good stability. So from graphite, you oxidize, you obtain graphite oxide, which are multi-layer, and by exfoliation, you obtain graphene oxide, which are more or less monolayer, with a lot of functional group. In our case, it is very important because depending on the nature of polymer, you can obtain some positive or negative interaction between nanofillers and the polymer chain. So this is a summary of preparation and oxidation of the graphene oxide. You start with graphite. With oxidation, you obtain graphene oxide. And by dialysis and exfoliation, by ultrasound, you obtain this aqueous dispersion of graphene oxide. So this is a slide to show the different steps. I will not describe in detail, just to have an idea. The synthesis and the functionalization of graphene oxide is composed of 4 main steps, and from the beginning to the end, you need 3 weeks to obtain a stable aqueous dispersion of graphene oxide. Alors, for the composite, we have chosen PVE. Alors, why PVE? Because by thermal cycling, you can induce gelation without adding a cross-linking agent. So just by thermal cycling, you obtain an hydrogel. And why? Because the thermal cycling induces the formation of local crystal junction. And this crystallization, local crystallization, is as origin of the three-dimensional formation of network. So just to show you, here the PVA solution, just by thermocycling, you obtain a nitrogen, and the same with graphene oxide. Alors, to ensure that we have a good synthesis and a good functionalization, we perform classically X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy. And here we have an example of a result, intensity of as function of bending energy. We can identify the different chemical bond, and for deconvolution of this graph, you can obtain the composition of graphene oxide inside the polymer matrix. So with this kind of study, we confirm a good synthesis and a good oxidation and a good exfoliation. Alors, just to show you qualitatively the interest of these composite materials, by introducing graphene oxide in PVA, you can increase notably the mechanical property. You can obtain an increase of stretching, elasticity, and also by the compression. Now, of course, we invest this property qualitatively. Alors, here you have the result of macroscopic results. And to investigate the property, we have three main parameters: the concentration of polymer matrix, the concentration of fillers, and the concentration of thermal cycling, because by varying the number of thermal cycling, you can modulate the rigidity of polymer matrix. So the main conclusion of this result is that the most efficient parameters to increase the viscoelasticity is the concentration of graphene oxide. Alors, we can associate this enhancement of viscoelastic property to the porous structure of a composite. So here you have some result obtained by scanning electron microscopy. So from if we compare figure A and B, you increase the number of cycling, so you obtain a decrease of pore size. And by increasing the concentration of graphene oxide, the fillers, if you compare figure C and figure G, you also put in evidence a decrease of pore size. And the decrease of pore size by increasing the graphene oxide concentration is more important than the decrease of pore size by increasing thermal cycle. So the most efficient parameter to increase viscoelastic property associated to a decrease of pore size is the increase of the concentration of nanofillers. We study the swelling in water, and in a good agreement with mechanical investigation, the increase of swelling is most important by increasing the concentration of graphene oxide. And finally, we use this composite for selective absorption. And for this, we investigate absorption of a dye. Alors, In the first step, this dye was chosen as a model pollutant, but it corresponds also to polluted water, for example, water used for textile industry. If you want to depollute the water used in textile industry, you have a lot of dyes to remove. So macroscopically, you can see when you increase the concentration of polymer matrix PVA, the concentration of cycle, the increase of absorption is not so clear. But when you increase the concentration of graphene oxide, you can observe an increase of absorption studied by immersion of composite in polymer in a dye solution. So, of course, we perform some quantitative measurement. So here you have the absorption quantity as function of time, as function of the different parameters. We can plot this absorption quantity as function of time with a classical kinetic model. In our case, the best one is a pseudo first order model. So you can deduce the value of absorption in stationary condition and the kinetics of absorption by the slope of this curve. And you can see, if you compare here the effect of graphene oxide and the effect of number of cycles, which is the parameter to modulate the rigidity of the polymer matrix, the increase of absorption is more important by increasing the graphene oxide concentration. And in this case, we can explain this by electrostatic interaction between methylene blue, and which is a cationic dye, and graphene oxide, which are negatively charged. And here it is a summary. We can correlate the absorption property and the viscoelastic property. So to summarize, for composite for selective absorption, this composite composed of a polymer matrix of PVA silicon just by thermocycling containing graphene oxide, you can increase the viscoelastic property associated to porous structure, and you increase the absorption capacity of this composite. We bring the proof of capacity of absorption in case of dye, and currently we perform some investigation for absorption with of metallic ions. So it is my end of my talk. At the end, I have some references if you are interested. I know I am ready to answer your question.
Thank you, Alain.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Is there any question in the audience?
That is a lot of information to process.
Yeah. Well, I have a question. You were talking about droplets with some magnetic field inside, and that when you increase the magnetic field, you align everything. But did you look at the dynamics of those droplets, like how it can break and so on? Like if you increase even more the magnetic field? Yeah.
Today I present some results in which we investigate the deformation of droplet just by applying a magnetic field.
Yeah.
I have a reference with other kind of magnetic nanoparticles. In this case, not citratide one, but magnetic nanoparticles with a double ligands. The ligands can attach to the surface of magnetic nanoparticles and also to the polymer matrix. In this case, we form aggregates between magnetic nanoparticles and the polymer matrix, and effectively we investigate the deformation of aggregate under the shear rate until breaking when the shear rate is sufficiently high. And we are currently publishing an article on this.
Okay. Well, I will look at the article later. Thank you very much. And yeah,
so
the
with the
okay.
So in the paper, sorry, Leah, to interrupt you, just
No
to go on with this paper. So in this paper, you show also the deformation of these aggregates of particles. Okay, interesting. I will be very interested to see that. And so do you have like do you observe different aggregates or a big aggregate? I mean, also how big are your systems?
We observe it's mechanic aggregates.
Okay.
It's mechanic aggregates because we observe optically, so we can observe mechanic aggregates in our condition, because magnetic nanoparticles with double ligands are in nano size, and by the interaction between magnetic nanoparticles and polymer chain, we induce the formation of micronic aggregates, which are aligned in the direction of the shear rate, and then until breaking.
Nice. I look forward to the paper then.
Yeah, same for me. Well, it was a lot of information, a lot of different methods, a lot of different results and so on. So a bit difficult to process, but very interesting. Yeah. I was just wondering something that is completely not related to the rheology, but more like, how do you propose some models? Because I know that hydrogel can be used more for bio application, and you have a lot of proteins that you can take into account. Do you sometimes work on this kind of models or not at all?
We don't use hydrogel for biomedical application in our case, but we have many references on this way. But we don't use hydrogel. In our case, we don't use hydrogel for biomedical application. Okay, it's mainly for what? In the last case is for selective absorption. Okay. We have seen that composite with graphene oxide are efficient to increase absorption, and currently we investigate absorption of metallic ions to remove metallic ions from water. Okay, super interesting. Thank you.
Nice.
It is more. It is more for environmental application.
Sure. Yeah. That's very interesting. Are you using that in the Seine River to clean the water?
We not be ready for Olympic Games.
You could have got money from Paris, from the city of Paris, to do that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Anyways, again, and so any other questions from the audience? Doesn't seem so. Well, if that's the case, Alain, we and I thank you again very much to be here with us today. That was very interesting, and as Leah said, a lot of information. So I would definitely need to go back on YouTube and check again your presentation to process it a bit more. Yes. But that's a great work. Thank you very much. Okay. I'm gonna stop the recording here, and